Hi, welcome to Inspirational Women in Biotech and Medicine. I am Sadie Senator, and today I have with me an amazing guest, Dr. Anne Fung. Dr. Fung, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to hear and share your story.
Thank you so much for having me, Sadie. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to meet you. To start, can you tell us a little bit about your current job?
Sure. I am the Chief Medical Officer at Perceive Biotherapeutics, and we are specializing in protective biologies in two of the most blinding diseases.
And what are those two diseases?
It's age-related macular degeneration and glaucoma.
Okay. And what does a typical day look like for you in your role, and what are you doing?
Hmm, good question. In startup biotech, that usually means, as a physician, that we're coming in as the company is finishing up the preclinical, the pre-human studies. And so we're brought in at that cusp of doing the first, when we're introducing the product for the first time to humans. So it involves writing an investigator brochure, which is a summary of everything that we know about the compound or the biologic that we're bringing about, and then summarizing the key animal information that will help investigators and then their patients make good decisions about whether this is an appropriate therapy for them.
Okay.
After that, we write a protocol, which is how you conduct the first trial and then the informed consent.
Okay, that's very interesting. And has there been any specific projects that you've worked on recently that are especially notable or that you'd like to share about?
Yes, we are one of the very first protective biologies that's administered as a one-time injection of a gene therapy into the eye. And we have been able to bring 30 years of one investigator and his lab's research to humans for the first time. So it's really, really exciting. He has found that gene that confers risk. You know, people say like, oh, is breast cancer or you know, different immune diseases, or is my, parents and grandparents' vision problem, is that genetic? So the question is like, is it genetic? So he found the genes that are responsible and then was able to go in and see what that amino acid switch did and how the protein is different. And so it just allows a overheated immune system to work in the eye. And by administering the protective form, we turn it down. So very exciting to bring someone's life work to patients and hopefully become closer and closer to a cure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the path or the academic path that has led you to your job today and how that comes into your day-to-day work and the projects that you're working on?
I'd be delighted to. Thanks for the question. My path has actually been a little unconventional for what I'm doing today. I majored in Chinese studies, which was a multidisciplinary major. I was doing language, history, philosophy, economics, and then a minor in econ. And I filled my elective time with my pre-meds. So, the physics, the chemistry, the bio all got done before senior year, and I took the MCATs. But then I wasn't quite ready to go straight into medical school. I felt like I wanted to understand the people of my ancestry better. I'm third generation born American, and so it's been a while since we've been really close to China. So I took the MCATs. That was an ace in my pocket. And then I moved to Hong Kong with my best friend from college, and I worked at a newspaper doing events, promotions, and marketing. I figured out at that point that I wanted to go to medical school because I had a belief that mass media could educate and empower, and it can, but it was a less direct way of doing it. And in medicine, I felt like I could at least make a difference one patient at a time, helping him, him, her, they just have a more comfortable time with their experience and give them hope. So I applied to med school from Hong Kong, fortunately got in, was at Cornell, um, and I selected ophthalmology as my field. I loved the surgical, the microsurgery, the medicine thinking. It tends to have long-term relationships with patients. So I could think, I could do stuff with my hands that were kind of immediate gratification, and I could have the relationship. So I came back and did my internship at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, residency at Stanford, and then again I took off a year. I wasn't ready to pick my fellowship yet. So got my boards done, I practiced, and I did some research. And that's when I was first exposed to macular degeneration. And I found that I just loved the biology of this disease. I love the retina's 10 layers. They all work together to produce sight. Um, they're cells that we're born with and they're meant to last a lifetime, but they don't in various ways. And so they produce disease. So it was really, that was my tip. And then I managed to match into a fellowship at Bascom Palmer in Miami, just at the advent of a brand new technology called, it's the anti-VEGF class. And it was the first time that we could recover vision for patients with macular degeneration. Before, it had been a blinding disease, something where we could slow the crash, but the patients ultimately were legally blind. And so with this, we could reverse that vision loss, give them their independence and life back. And that has been my career. I spent the first 10 years researching in my clinic as a principal investigator. And then about 10 years into it, Genentech asked if I would come help lead their post-marketing studies with Lucentis. And that's been another 10 years. I thought it would just be 2 or 3, but nope, here we are.
Yeah. And what does the post-marketing work look like? I'm just not super familiar with the term.
Yeah. So post-marketing means after a drug is approved by the FDA. Um, the phase 3 studies, I can take you briefly into phase 1, 2, 3 if you want, but the phase 3 studies are the ones that compare this new technology, this new technology to the standard of care. 2 parallel phase 3 studies need to demonstrate, is it more efficacious than the standard of care, and is it sufficiently safe? And you try to get it into as broad and general a population as you can so that you can tell patients and physicians about the safety in women, in men, if there is a pediatric population, in the littler bodies, littler and younger bodies. But it hasn't answered a lot of questions about the nuances for how individual disease presents. So post-marketing is when we go into that big database of information that's been generated in the phase 3s, or we actually fund new studies that answer the more practical questions of, is this drug going to work the same in women as it did in this mostly male population? Or is it going to work in this subtype of that disease?
Okay, that's very interesting. And how does your work as a principal investigator carry over into your other positions and roles that you've had since?
I love people who have actually done the job that you're writing the procedure manuals and information for. So because I was a principal investigator, I had written protocols, informed consents. I had taken them myself to the Institutional Review Board, the IRB.
Okay.
And I knew the questions they were going to ask me. And I knew what information would cause them concern from the investigator brochure as well as the protocol. So now when I'm writing the IBs and the protocols, I really have a mind to what the IRB is going to think. I trained my own study investigators and the technical team. I know what language is just unnecessarily confusing. There's no reason to write things in, uber technical mumbo jumbo that, that requires a dictionary to understand. When everybody understands why we're doing something and what's going on, and we can explain it in plain language to the patient, it's the best and smoothest for everybody.
Okay, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And also, earlier you were talking about the importance of having those patient relationships. Do you have any significant stories or stories with patients that have impacted you and that you've worked with long term?
So I still practice clinical medicine. I practice 2 days a month, and I don't think I'll ever give it up because my patients are the heart of why I continue to pursue science and pursue new therapies. I have known generations of families now. The grandkids who come in and translate for their grandparents, or the ones who now are, practicing physicians. It's really been such an honor. In my field, we give these injections to each eye up to once a month. And so some patients are having both eyes treated. I see them twice a month, 24 times a year. And I don't see most of my family and even my best friends 24 times a year. We don't have time for that. Um, a lot of, I have patients, I think Dr. W, he was 104 years old. He went out to lunch every day and he just came in every month with a new story for me. I have a favorite patient, Elaine. I've been taking care of her for 20 years now, and she is as feisty. She's 100. Is she 100? I think she's 100. I think she's 100. She's as feisty as they come to this day, and is always like, Anne, can you believe what happened on the news? And just like, what about this? And what are we going to do about that? And then she came with me to Genentech when I was working there as one of our patient speakers. And she announced that she was part of a club called the SOBs. And they were the sexy old broads. And I thought, Elaine, I want to be in that club when I'm 85, 90, 95, and 100. But they're so inspiring. It shows you what it's like to live a rich life through all the decades. Whenever anyone says I'm old, I'm like, you might be older, but old is really relative. It's what you make of it.
That's really powerful.
So
20 years is a long time to see someone 24 times. That's a long time. That's a
exactly.
really like that's how you foster a relationship with someone. I mean, it's amazing.
It's been really fun. They saw me pregnant, when I was like pregnant and, doing the injections. I teed up I've had two children, and I teed up all my patients before my daughter's birth, the first one, so that I returned to the office to do just injections 2 weeks after she was born. And I'd go in like once a week for those first couple months just to like keep them going on their therapy. And they're still like, I remember when you were pregnant. Oh my gosh, she's so big now.
Aw.
And it's really been a joy.
Taking things a little further back, when you were in high school, did you know that you wanted to be involved in ophthalmology? And if not, when did that, or just medicine generally, because you said you were doing pre-med
Yeah.
in college, I guess when did that interest evolve or come to be?
I always, I have to say, I loved biology at UHS.
Okay.
I loved all of our science classes. We were given so much autonomy to do our own, to conduct the experiments and have our fingers in it and understand the why. That continued into college. I actually encountered um, my first my first semester of inorganic chemistry was tough. It wasn't a natural and quick understanding. And I think I wanted between inorganic chemistry and calculus, those were not my dream areas. I told my mom, like, I think I'm done with pre-med. I'm just going to keep going. She's like, just take one more class. And that next one was organic chemistry, which I happen to love. It made all the sense to me. Um, Medicine, my father is a physician, and we would hear and talk about his patients a lot at the dinner table. And he was always coming home with food gifts, abalones, frozen ducks, caviar. It was just wine for my parents. But there was something that was resonant from a young age that these people really were touched by something that he had done for them. And that felt and continues to feel very meaningful. We can all be discouraged by the systems we work in, but at the end of the day, when you make a difference and make someone else's life better, it just, as my kids used to say, fills the bucket. So I did, as I had this thought that I might go into business or broadcasting, but went to medical school. In medical school, I loved surgery. So plastic surgery was really interesting, even OBGYN. I wanted to work with women and empower women through women's health. But at the end of the day, it was that constellation of being able to do things with my hands and think and have the relationships that hold me. And I liked the personality in ophthalmology. Every subspecialty of medicine does have a personality.
If you were to describe the personality of ophthalmology, how would you describe it? Or maybe versus another field that you talked about versus plastic surgery or OBGYN, how would it compare?
Um, so ophthalmology is quite artistic
Okay.
in because a lot of our diagnosis is visual. We dilate the pupils. For those who have been to an ophthalmologist or optometrist office, your pupils get dilated so that we can use the lenses and the light to look in, and we're literally looking at the retina, which is an outgrowth of the brain. And it's pattern recognition. We can see the blood vessels, the retinal tissue. In diseases like diabetes, there's little hemorrhages or little white cotton wool spots that are areas of tissue infarction. So ophthalmologists, because you're visually pattern recognizing, but then you're also doing the surgery, it's a bit like sculpting. It's a field where people are genuinely curious about a lot of aspects of life. So makes for great conversation. Very well. Ophthalmology has its origins in Austria, Switzerland, and Germany due to the fineness and precision of the blades that they were able to manufacture. Because in order to do microsurgery, it was the blades and then the microscopes. So we needed the optical systems to be able to see these parts of the eye, and then the fine, teeny instruments to be able to do the microsurgery. So it has these roots in that Germanic part of Europe, very precise, but accordingly, there's a lot of global travel to share ideas, and it makes for a very rich conversation.
Wow, I really like that. And I like that you're touching on the human side a lot because I think that's super important when talking about being a physician and just those interactions. What you were saying about your dad, how he would bring home gifts from people. I think that's very powerful to know that you're able to
Thank
make
you.
a difference. So that's very inspiring to me because I think that's super important. And then also moving on to more of like daily life in your role, what does a typical workday look like and how do you manage your work-life balance?
Good question. I'm sure different members of my family might tell you that I do or don't balance my life well. Um, a, a day in the life, let's see. So as chief medical officer, I'm overseeing everything medical. I have clinical operations, the people who run the clinical trials. Um, they're on my team. Regulatory work, the people who are filing our applications and our correspondence with the FDA and the health authority of any country we're in around the world. So one of my previous programs, I think we were in 13 countries, and we needed to explain our technology and ask for permission to conduct the trials in their countries and then ultimately to file the data there. So ClinOps, regulatory, safety. When we look at the safety profile, there's a certain science to how you aggregate the data to make sure you see the most robust signal. Biostatistics and data management. So all these data are produced from up to 90 to 200 clinical trial site offices around the world. And all that data needs to be put into a database, fed in, and then analyzed. And then importantly, the strategic aspect of what I do. I am the medical partner with my CEO and then the chief financial officer And it's up to us to be able to say, okay, we're going, as we ask for funding for a certain amount of work. Series A in venture is usually funding that final preclinical work so that you can then open up an an NDA or IND. Anyway, it's an IND, which is the application so that you can start doing trials in humans. So you have to pay for a certain amount of data so that you can open your IND, and then you need another chunk to fund that phase 1, phase 2 of your trials. So strategically, I'm working with them to say, we need this information on this many patients. It's going to cost this much, and then we fundraise on that. So a day in my life goes across all these different conversations. A corporate calendar is open so people can book in on your calendar wherever. And I find myself, taking hats on and off all day, every 30 to 60 minutes, switching topics, trying to block time so that I have time for a thorough review of a document. But I really try to protect if it's time for me to drive my kids to school, I'll block from 7:30 to 8:30 so that I can be there. And then same at the end of the day or during the day. Today, for example, I'm part of the parent association for my daughter's school. And before Thanksgiving, we put on a huge feast for the faculty. And so I spent several hours of my day there, helping bring in the food, set it up, and the faculty were delighted. But it's important to me that I know my daughter's teachers, that they know me, because it's the only, my I I had children so that I could be their mom. And if I'm not present, I'm not their mom. So it weaves. I must say, on that topic of work-life balance, I am incredibly fortunate to have gotten such specialized expertise that I have autonomy in my role. I help set the schedule. I can control my schedule. I can say yes and no. And you don't have as much autonomy in the early days. Lord knows, when I was a medical student, an intern, a resident, a fellow, for sure when I was a fellow, did not have autonomy. And in the early days when I was a junior faculty, you're much more susceptible, you're at other people's expectations. But getting clear with yourself, what are the big rocks in your jar? What must you have there? And then you fill in all the other stuff.
Okay,
It
definitely
works.
interesting to hear. And
And I have a lot of help.
okay, I like the rocks in the jar, like how you manage everything. It's a really good metaphor.
Get the big ones in first, because then, the medium will go in, and then the little ones, and then the sand, and then the water. There's always room for a little more, but you got to get, my kids, my family, my parents are the big rocks. And frankly, my work family is a big rock too. So we make it.
Good. And then also kind of connecting off of that, do you have any aspirations outside of work that have become super important to you or you dedicate a lot of time to?
So yoga, I started practicing yoga after I finished residency. I was introduced to it from a colleague, and I just found myself, Ashtanga yoga is a form of yoga made for very competitive people. I do not advise being competitive because you will injure yourself, as I did,
Yeah.
because it's a series of poses, and it's kind of always I can do that too. I can do that. It's like, no, your body maybe shouldn't that day. But over the decades, it continues to be a really important part that just keeps me connected to my mind, my body. You really cannot do some standing poses while trying to multitask and think about something else. So it's a wonderful way to just clear and reconnect with yourself. I'm also really passionate about neurodiversity. I appreciate that our brains learn in a lot of different ways. Um, I never thought that medical school was hard. I was like, yeah, it takes a lot of tenacity. I was like, anyone can go to medical school. You just need to be tenacious. Well, I think differently about that now. There's every brain can take in different information and is interested in different information and then processes it differently. And we need all the different ways to solve the problems that are coming up or, the challenges of the future. My kids learn differently than I learned, and they don't, we have been on a journey to find the right teachers and school environment. Um, and so I want to learn more about that. By the way, if I can slip in a little statistic,
Yeah.
of the general population, 17% are dyslexic, are born dyslexic. In the prison population, it's 60%.
Wow. Okay, that's
Yeah.
very interesting. I didn't know about this.
So something has, it's incredible when you see, and this is where kind of becoming a really good data scientist and learning how to look at data, how you ask a question gives you different answers and then how you analyze. But when you see such a disparity like that, a difference between these two groups, something is not working for one of the groups. And so it's our challenge to go in and dig and figure out what it is. But to me, I feel like we have failed a lot of people who have ended up in the prison system. It's easy to compare ourselves to
Mhm.
those around us. And sometimes to think, oh my gosh, I have to, I'm in the library twice as long, or, I'm having to seemingly work so much harder. Well, maybe in something it is, you do have to put in a little more grit. And then I'll tell you there are other things that are just seemingly obvious to you that are absolutely not obvious to other people. And that's where, never feel like other people are smarter than you because your unique way of seeing it can absolutely move the needle.
Okay, definitely. That's really interesting to hear and good to hear. Good advice. And then also kind of moving back to the career aspect, what has been the most rewarding part of your career so far? I know we talked about the human side of medicine and stuff like that, but if there's anything else, any specific experiences or stories that you'd like to touch on, I think it's really interesting to hear what really touches people in their work and keeps them motivated to go to work every day.
I think so for sure, the patients that I've made a huge difference on, it was really cool. When I was in medical school, I helped figure out a diagnosis of Cushing's disease in a guy who everyone thought was developmentally delayed. And then when his family members said, oh, yeah, well, when he was in the Marines, I was like, wait, what? Like, you're typically not, like, you don't get into the Marines if you're not, neurologically pretty quick. And so I said, so we need to look at something. And that was really gratifying. And diagnosing some brain tumors, soon after I finished residency was pretty amazing. Scientifically, I've helped a team, been a part of a really dynamic team who brought the first surgery drug device product through the FDA for the eye for macular degeneration. And that was an incredibly heavy creative lift because the FDA had never seen anything like it. The field had never seen anything like it. And we worked globally on that project. And that was really exciting. But I think the piece that I'm most proud of throughout all my work, whether at the clinic, at Genentech, at Perceive, frankly, at the schools and the organizations that I volunteer for, is building the team. When we have a passion and love for a particular question or quest, it is infectious. And when we can see the potential in other people to do their best, give their best, or just, help lift a little bit. And then you see this come together to make progress. It feels amazing. So those are my favorites professionally.
Okay, definitely. The teamwork sounds very important. And then kind of in the opposite direction, what has been the biggest challenge that you've had so far in your career and how have you overcome
In my career, there have been times when I either, oh, actually, not just a few times, many times when I've had an idea, a thought, I've said it, presented it, and it either has just been completely unacknowledged to the point that I'm like, do I not have a voice? Was I whispering? Um, and learning how to say things in a way that the group can hear has been a real learning experience. Is it the way in which I framed the thought? Was it waiting for the right moment? Was it making sure I had the attention of the right stakeholders in the room? So definitely a learning skill and frustrating and self-questioning at times when that happens. Then sort of like the next level of that is when people actively are shooting down an idea and challenging or just being like, no, it can't be done, or why would we do that? Either being discounted or else also being in the situation where when you switch, um, when you switch professional environments, if I'm accustomed to being in, among ophthalmology peers, we have a certain way of speaking, a certain way of seeing situations, solving problems, and you kind of know that. But then when I went into biotech for the first time, I had marketing professionals, the sales team, all of whom have slightly, while we work for the same company and the same product, we have different goals and responsibilities that we're trying to fulfill. And we have different languages that we speak. If someone has spent their whole professional life in business or sales or marketing and minimal in healthcare, they'll see a situation differently. And then these days with insurance, that throws a real third element, third pillar of the situation into the mix. So getting people to communicate and align on what the issue is sometimes takes saying things a few different ways, and then to get to consensus on what the right option is. And you can lose sight of what's most important. So you may hear in medicine a lot, or in pharma at least, the question of what's right for the patient, because there can be a lot of factions pulling you different ways on a solution. But when you then ground to what is right for the human who is going to get this product, then a lot of things melt away and all the complexity goes away and you can see what's right.
As a last question, just to wrap up the interview, for the people watching, the young woman or anybody who's watching the podcast, what advice do you have for people who are interested in becoming a part of the medical field or biotechnology? And what do you wish you knew when you were starting your career path?
Hmm. Big question. Like, oh, what, letters to myself at which point? There's so many that I could have given myself. Um, the piece that carries you through always is know yourself, love yourself, and take that quiet time to make sure you're okay. And that means, life gets really, really busy. Like it can feel busy always, but, find that activity that gives you some peace and the opportunity to get into a meditative, connected place where you can really feel what your mind knows and wants, because you have a lot of wisdom that is worth tapping into and that is important to the progress of your field. But it gets washed out by all the noise. And so just try not to be don't be overly busy all the time. Get the time, quiet, hear yourself, and find some really good mentors who can guide you along that journey and kindly ask the simple but important questions about what matters. And it will help always get you back to that place to consider what the path should be.
Wow, that is really powerful. I guess the idea of intuition is kind of in there, I'm seeing, and that's very
It
important.
is. And don't ever discount your own intuition. It's probably one of the most powerful things that we have. And it's something that I don't think, I think is going to be harder to replace with the artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Definitely. It's a
Yeah,
good thing to think about. Thank you so much. I will definitely be carrying
sure.
that forward as I continue to go on to college and all of that. And I hope that the people who watch this as well take it to heart and carry it forward with them as well. So thank you so much for sharing your story. It is really inspiring to me. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone else finds it just as inspiring as I do. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with me and all of us.